Zevlor's Sleep Stories. Performed by Glenn McCready. The Fisher and the Selkie by Yvonne Margeau. Hello, I am Zevlor. I'm here because I understand you're having trouble sleeping. Don't worry about that right now. Sit with me and breathe in, calm and slow. And out again. Yes, just like that. Make yourself comfortable. And when you're ready, put your head down on the pillow, and I'll tell you the story of the Fisher and the Selkie. Once, long ago, in a land of magic and legend, there lived a family of fishers. Their home lay on the coast between two great rivers. There the road swung inland to avoid a wide stretch of marsh, a quiet zone of meres, bogs, and streams, backing a low coast of dunes and shifting sands. The coast had no safe anchorage, only submerged sandbars and clinging muds. Merchants and corsairs alike avoided its treacherous shallows, and the fishers lived in peace. On stormy days, the fishers huddled in their huts of salt-bleached driftwood, shivering, listening to the sea hammer against the outer dunes, sending waves crashing over into the beachside lagoons and turning the water brackish. At such times it was the custom to keep the children calm by sharing stories, just like the one I'm telling to you now. On calm days they fished along the shingle banks, gathered herbs in dune slacks, dropped woven baskets into still, deep meres to entice eels, or rowed out in their small, fragile, hollowed log outriggers to do battle with the swordfish for which the coast was named. Catching swordfish was a hero's story, always the excuse for a party, and everyone would come to the beach as the driftwood fire spat green and blue sparks into the evening sky, and the huge fish slowly steamed and blackened on the embers. And when it was done, they would feast. Of course, whenever they feasted, they would sing the great tales and dance. Even in the lean times, when there was no great fish to share, the eels went deep, and the people tightened their belts and endured the winters. There were still songs and parties. Songs about the times of plenty long past, and the summer to come, and dancing for men and women, boys and girls, linking all the families up and down the coast, for the fishers loved to party, everyone except Tirsi. Tirsi wasn't a kindlet anymore, having grown too old to be supervised by grandmother, though not yet ready to join the adult world. They spend most days foraging alone in the dunes, listening to the quiet of wind shushing the sand grains, the click of their sandals on beach cobbles, the susurrating hush of the sea, or the deep boom of storm waves bringing in driftwood and flotsam to be collected. Today was a calm day following storm, and Tirsi had walked far to get away from all the other fishers who were out on the strand seeking sea-washed treasures. This part of the coast was bare and windswept, backed by low dunes and acres of sodden marshland. Even the fishers struggled to safely traverse its treacherous mires and green bogs. To seaward lay an equally dangerous stretch of mudflats and quicksand. It was one of Tirsi's favorite places, because almost no one else ever came there. Someone was here today, though, down on the strand line amidst the torn kelp and tide-washed debris. Someone child-sized. Tirsi stared for a moment, then began to scramble and run down through the low vegetation and loose sand of the foredunes. A child, and they were not moving. But a closer approach revealed no child. Instead, a seal lay there, rounded and sleek, with flippers and a tail and a friendly, almost human face. As he neared it, the animal rolled over and made a piteous sound. It was young, still partly cloaked in its multi-shaded juvenile coat of fur. Tirsi wondered if it was injured. All around lay storm debris, but no sign of any other seals. A long look in a full circle revealed no one else nearby, only this one young creature. It had changed. The seal. Now a girl lay there, skin glimmering in the morning light, droplets of water caught in her short, dark hair. She wore a long fur coat in shades of mottled cream and brown, but her arms and feet were bare. She looked at Tirsi out of a seal's wet brown eyes. What are you? I am a Selkie. You have heard of us? Tirsi rubbed unbelieving eyes and sank to a crouch on the wet sand. Of course the fishers knew about Selkies. They were a legend, sung around the fire, a story told to wee ones in the long winter nights, a myth. No one in living memory had met one of the seal folk turned human. The tales told that Selkies could guide you to a vast treasure in the deep, provided you could swim well enough, or that if you stole their coat, they would be forced to work for you as long as you kept it safe, or that if one was treated kindly, helped, and released freely, it might tell you the one thing you wished to know above all others. The Selkie girl's face was round and soft, with a snub nose and a wide mouth. Not a pretty face, but a friendly one, as friendly as the seal she had been a moment ago. She still had sealish whiskers. They twitched when she smiled. "What's your name?" Tirsi winced. That was rude. "I beg your pardon. I am Tirsi of the fisherfolk. Please may I know your name?" The girl scrambled to her feet, clutching at Tirsi's shoulder to steady herself, as her big toes dug deep into the sand, as if feeling it for the first time. "I am Aliaya of the Selkinder," she said. Her name rippled in Tirsi's ears like the movement of little waves on the tide line. Aliaya. It was like a song, like the songs the seals made far out at sea, when the swells ran high and wind blew their voices into the land. A distant sound caught Tirsi's attention. There were fishers back along the spit of beach, just at the edge of sight. 2 of them, bending over something washed up by the tides. The Bursin boys. They'd been close by all morning, and Tirsi had been pretending they weren't. You didn't want to meet the Bursin brothers if you were on your own. They would love the honor of bringing home a Selkie. Feeling suddenly protective, Tirsi caught up the Selkie girl, lifting her off her feet and setting off briskly towards the shelter of the dunes. "Where are we going?" "Not far. I'm going to take you somewhere safer." Aliaya gazed at him with bright, earnest eyes. "Are you going to hurt me?" she asked. She didn't seem in the least afraid. "No, of course not." Tirsi trudged into the gap between 2 low dunes, easing into the morass of sand pockets, marine mud, and little hidden pools. He laid her down on a short sward of marsh pennyroyal and sea rocket, out of sight of the sea. She ran her fingers through the vegetation, tearing off a few leaves, and a scent of mint and mustard rose up. She sighed happily. "This is what I wanted," she said. "You wanted plants?" Tirsi was puzzled. Seals usually ate fish and mollusks. Maybe they ate seaweed, too. "No, not exactly." She paused to cram some more leaves into her mouth, chewing fiercely before spitting them out with an irritated look on her face. "I wanted something new." At Tirsi's confused look, she explained. "In the sea, we all swim together, sometimes dancing in the deep currents, sometimes hauling out on the resting beaches. We travel many miles to our favorite cliff refuges or fishing grounds, and when we come back to the shallow coasts, you are always here, always in the dry, on your 2 legs, always the same. I wanted to visit the land, to see what you were like." She paused, and her voice faltered. "I heard you were dangerous." "Dangerous?" Tirsi nodded. "Dangerous to seals, yes. Every year we catch some. It's a task for our old ones, because the journey to the seal beaches is dangerous, and it's easy to get swept off the rocks. But we'd never kill Selkies." "How would you know?" she asked. This was a difficult question. Tirsi puzzled over it. Did she mean the Selkies lived amongst the ordinary seals? Or were all seals actually Selkinder? And surely if death was at hand, a Selkie would change or speak. Before he could ask, this reverie was interrupted by Aliaya. "You were afraid of those others, the ones you call boys, men." It was a simple statement, but there was truth in it. Yes, Tirsi tried to suppress it, but their shoulders twitched in revulsion. Aliaya looked on, her pitiless gaze seeming to judge all Tirsi was and wasn't. "You are a pup-bearer, then? Like me? A girl? A woman?" "No," Tirsi sighed. It was foolish to feel ashamed. The Selkie couldn't be expected to understand. "When we are born, we are kindlets. No one knows what we will be, boy or girl, until we are grown. It usually happens after 10 or 12 years. We are ill for a while, our body changes, and afterwards we will be a boy or a girl, and we stay that way. It was suddenly difficult to speak. Tirsi swallowed hard and carried on. "I don't know what I am. How many summers have you lived?" 13. Tirsi stumbled on the word, but once it was out, the sense of relief was enormous. How odd that he could speak to this stranger when there was no one at home to talk to at all. Her seal eyes gleamed compassionately as she took Tirsi's hands in hers. Her fingers were cool and ever so slightly damp. In the morning air, her sealskin coat steamed, letting off a strong smell of fish oil and ammonia. It wasn't pleasant, though much milder than the stink of a fully occupied seal colony. "When will you change?" Her question went straight to the heart of the matter. I don't know. Tirsi tried to speak calmly. "Grandmother says she can tell, but I don't want her to tell me. I didn't want to know. I think." The wind shifted slightly, and the clear sound of voices came to their ears. "Shh!" Tirsi let go her hands and gestured down to the ground. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." The girl shrank down onto the turf, responding to Tirsi's fear. In no more than a blink, she was gone, and the seal lay there, gazing up at him out of mournful eyes. It opened its mouth as if to wail, but Tirsi laid a hand on its snout and whispered, "It's them. I'll lead them away if I can. You'll be safe here, I promise, but you must keep quiet." The fitful breeze shifted again as Tirsi scrambled up the low line of dunes and crouched just below the crest. The voices came from the gap between dunes where he had carried Aliaya through. Peering over the top, Tirsi saw clearly the marks they'd made, trudging through the sand, from the water's edge to this very spot. Stupid! It led the brothers right to them. Fortunately, though, the Bursin boys were notoriously poor trackers. A herd of the tiny Mia deer had also passed through this slot in the dunes, probably at dawn this morning, and the brothers were unable to distinguish which creatures had made the tracks. They missed the point where Tirsi had stepped sideways into the low, grassy sward, cropped daily by the deer. Instead, they followed the deer track, churned up here and there by the bumptious interactions between young members of the herd, until it petered out at the edge of a stretch of marshy pools and green bog patches. The elder boy stepped forward and sank to his knees, hauling himself out with curses. The other reached into his pocket, pulled out a beach pebble, and flung it at the nearest patch of green, where it plopped down quietly and sank without a trace. "It can't have gone that way. We must have missed something." Tirsi almost jumped out of their skin at a cold touch on the ankle. It was the girl, back in human form, as she slithered up the dune beside him. He put a hand to his lips and gestured her to keep low. Below, the brothers had paused at exactly the place where Tirsi had turned aside. There was no need to look. Their voices, ripe with contempt, came clearly through the crisp air, from a position exactly opposite where Fisher and Selkie lay, on the side of the dune. Tirsi put a finger to Aliaya's lips. She nodded. "What is that stink?" To Tirsi's horror, the wind was carrying the Selkie's distinctive rich smell straight to the boys standing below. Surely even a bad hunter would realize exactly what that meant. But it seemed not. "Smells like something crawled ashore and died over there. Let's not get any closer." "Yeah, that's disgusting." There was a pause. Tirsi imagined the boys looking around for other signs and hoped they were seeing nothing. "You know what it's like. The sneak. It knows these lands like an animal. I bet it has secret ways through the bog." I wanted to see what it was carrying. The voice was a petulant whine. "Me too, but it's gone now. When it gets back to the village, we can ask it nicely." This voice was deeper and rich with the expectation of future malice. Tirsi waited a long, painful moment, hearing the boys breathing as they scrambled out of the dune field, and set off back across the hard-packed sand of the foreshore. When at last they peeped over the dune crest again, the brothers were already well on their way back in the direction of the village. Aliaya rolled onto her back and lay staring into the sky, which was clear and very blue. Tirsi lay down beside her. "They say if you release a Selkie without harm, it will tell you the answer to the most important question you can ask." The words hung in the air between them, but at last Aliaya sighed. "It is true," she said. "I had thought to visit your home. I would very much like to meet the grandmother in your village, but now I think it would be unwise." Her voice trailed off, and she turned her head towards the distant ocean, muffled by the dunes. Then she rolled onto her side and touched Tirsi's face, one finger going to her mouth to taste the tear she found there. "Salt," she said. "We are not so different, you and I." She paused and regarded Tirsi with an expression both curious and kind. "You are afraid that you will become a boy, that you will be like them, cruel and spiteful, or that you will be a pup-bearer like me. And if you want pups of your own, you will have to learn how to look more kindly on such as they." Tirce's eyes closed in misery, but her touch was soft and reassuring. "You will never be like them," she said. "I think you should go see this grandmother of yours. I have a feeling she knows much more about you than you know about yourself." They talked for hours that day, the fisher and the Selkie child, tales of the fireside and the family games in summer on the sand, stories of long journeys into the north under the flickering lights in endless darkness, and back to sing off the Sword Coast in the spring swells. They learned each other's pasts, the families in which they'd grown, the needs and desires of their peoples, and the dangers each faced and feared. It was easy to talk to Aliaya, and as they spoke, Tirce felt a fierce desire to persuade his people to make a peaceful alliance with the Selkinder. They had much to learn from one another. At last, the light gave way to gleaming phosphorescence along the strand, and the moon rose, laying down a glittering path across the risen tide. Tirce and Aliaya walked down to the water's edge. She entered the water as a girl, her sealskin coat sealing itself around her like a second skin, and stood knee-deep in the brimming water. "I am safe in my own place now," she said simply. "Do you ask your question? You have earned its answer." Tirce thought very hard about it. A day ago, the question would have been easy, the chance to know the future from the lips of someone uninvolved in their everyday life. But now everything felt different, and so did the question. "Will you be my friend?" Aliaya laughed, a sound like the ripple of waves over hot sand on an incoming tide. "I am," she said. "I am your friend, Tirce Fisher, and you are mine." And with a twist and a splash, the seal leapt into the waves and away. It was dawn again by the time Tirce reached the village. His would-be tormentors had long since given up waiting and were snoring in their mother's hut. It was so early that nothing was stirring bar a single grey-bird calling in the faint first light, and the spiders in dew-spangled webs clinging to every bush and tussock. A decision lay ahead, fragile as the webs, a choice that might change the relationship between fishers and Selkinder forever. As Tirce climbed through the village to grandmother's house, the breeze came down to meet him, redolent with scents of mint and caraway. Grandmother was awake and making tea. Possibly grandmother already knew everything, but it was past time to talk to her anyway. The sun was going down over the sea, sinking slowly into the clouded west off the Sword Coast. in a blur of pinks and gold. The sand where he stood was still warm. He enjoyed sinking his feet into it, crunching it between his toes. On his back a tiny kindlet slept, cradled, snug and close in a sling. Another, a little older, clung to his neck and sparse beard, perching fearlessly on his shoulder, confident in its carer's strong grip. "Grandfather!" The high, clear call floated down on the evening breeze. Tirsi turned to see a skinny child, aged no more than 6 or 7, clad in a multi-shaded sealskin that left feet and arms bare, running across the sand towards him. He was still getting used to his courtesy title and the implied pronouns that went with it. He would father no child, just as grandmother before him had borne none. Yet every child in the village was in some sense his. The running child reached his side and hugged him, clinging to his leg as they turned together to gaze out to sea. "Grandfather!" He felt a tug on his free arm and looked down into an upturned face. "Is mother coming?" Tirsi looked to the horizon, beyond the salt flats, to the surf, thundering white in the distance. It was certainly too far to see a figure as small as a seal, or a person, and yet a part of him knew that a slender young woman in a sealskin wrap was making her way towards him across the wide mudflats and shingle bars. "Yes," he said. "Yes, Leolan, my lovely. Your mother is coming tonight to take you home." Long grass blows at the edge of the sea. The tide is running high and free. The wind is singing sweet and wild, the tale of the fisher and the Selkie child. There, that's better. Sleep well now, and may all your dreams be peaceful. And remember, should you ever need it, you have family in Baldur's Gate.